Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Ryan Truchelut from WeatherTiger, and tonight I will be bringing you the very latest on Tropical Storm Nicole, which is about 24 hours away from probably making landfall as a Category 1 hurricane on the Florida East Coast. So there's going to be widespread surge, wind, and rain impacts from this bizarre late season storm. I'm going to break all of that down tonight, tell you what you can expect across the state in terms of those impacts. I'm going to wait just a minute for the audience to filter in here, probably wait about 2 minutes, and then I'll get right into the forecast because there's plenty to talk about. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started because there's a lot of forecasts to talk about tonight. I'm Dr. Ryan Truchelut of WeatherTiger, and this is Tropical Storm Nicole, making its way towards the western Bahamas overnight tonight and eventually the Florida East Coast into tomorrow. So let's get right into the forecast. We'll talk a little bit about what to expect, and then I'll be breaking down those surge, wind, and rain impacts region by region across the state and when you can expect them where you live. So first, let's take a look at the key messages that the National Hurricane Center wants to communicate tonight about Tropical Storm Nicole. The first one that matters to the U.S. is that hurricane conditions are now expected across east central Florida and portions of southeastern Florida late Wednesday into early Thursday. And tropical storm conditions are expected across a broad part of the Florida East Coast as well. And going along with that wind threat, there is, of course, dangerous storm surge that's going to be occurring along a very wide swath of the Florida coastline. This is a very large storm. It's going to have widespread impacts that extend even north into coastal Georgia and the Carolinas. So because of that, National Hurricane Center wants to remind you, do not focus on the exact track of Nicole. Exactly where the center crosses the coastline isn't all that important in this case because those hazards are going to be extending across much of the Florida Peninsula through Thursday and Friday. And finally, the last key message that they want to communicate is Nicole's also going to be producing heavy rainfall, particularly Wednesday and Thursday across the Florida Peninsula, and that's going to cause a risk of flash flooding and urban flooding, particularly in some of those areas that got such heavy rainfall during Hurricane Ian just about 6 weeks ago. So this is the NHC's latest track forecast as of 4 o'clock with the 7 p.m. position and intensity updated. Maximum sustained winds currently 65 miles per hour. And Nicole is now nudging just south of due west with its movement west-southwest at about 10 miles per hour. So the general idea here going forward is that west-southwest movement is going to continue through about midday tomorrow. Nicole's likely to intensify to a Category 1 hurricane as it's by tomorrow afternoon as it's moving through the northwestern Bahamas and make landfall close to midnight tomorrow, somewhere in this swath likely between Cape Canaveral and Palm Beach. That would be the most likely places for landfall to occur as likely a Category 1 hurricane. That's going to be then moving inland, curving west-northwest and then eventually northwest going forward during the day on Thursday and then for the overnight hours Thursday into Friday. NHC track currently just kind of scrapes along the nature coast here, but certainly a track a little bit further out west into the Gulf of Mexico or also staying on land over the Florida Peninsula are both possible. So we'll keep an eye on that, but this is a high confidence forecast that we're going to see a hurricane landfall in about 24 hours here in southeastern or east central Florida. These are the last few National Hurricane Center intensity forecasts. They show Nicole peaking out tomorrow, late tomorrow, and then early Thursday as a Category 1 hurricane. That's the likely landfall intensity. And you can see Nicole has been intensifying over the course of the day today. So taking a look at what's going on out there right now, this is infrared satellite imagery of Nicole. If you were watching Nicole yesterday, you may recall that it was actually called a subtropical storm. It wasn't a tropical storm until about Thursday, today at 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. And the reason for that is Nicole really didn't have a strong area of thunderstorm activity, kind of co-located with the center of circulation. So there's the area of low pressure. You can see it spinning around, moving just south of due west. And you can see that there's convective activity now ringing this center. Well, 24 hours ago, really you just had the thunderstorm activity that was kind of in these peripheral bands far away from the center. Nicole's still a very large storm. It still has that broad circulation that it began with, but it's developed this more tropical core, and because of that, the maximum wind speeds have come up, and it's also setting itself up for more intensification as it crosses these warm waters in the lower 80s over the Bahamas and then over the Gulf Stream on approach to Florida tomorrow. So we have an Air Force reconnaissance airplane that's flying around and investigating Nicole tonight. Here's southeast Florida, and Nicole is about 300 miles right now east of Port St. Lucie. And you can see these last couple fixes where the plane's flying through the center. You can see that motion a little bit south of due west. Key here is that the plane has actually been finding that Nicole did intensify through the afternoon hours of the day today, and there now are flight level winds of, suggestive of a strong tropical storm, and indicative of potentially Nicole heading for a Category 1 hurricane intensity by the time we wake up tomorrow, or at least by tomorrow midday. Now, going forward from here, this is Nicole's current position out east of the Bahamas, and these are some of the models for where Nicole's going to be moving in the short term. So basically 24 hours from now, around 7 o'clock tomorrow, will be just north of Freeport in the Bahamas, and then starting to make that northwest curve to a landfall somewhere between Palm Beach and Brevard counties, maybe between 10 o'clock and 3 a.m. Overnight tomorrow night. And then that northwest turn that takes it up over east central Florida, through west central Florida, and then north through eastern portions of the Panhandle. Now, I do want to point out that while models are in pretty good agreement, there has been a little bit of a trend towards faster movement of the storm during the day today. And with that faster movement, the front that's kind of coming down and is going to pick up Nicole and eventually turn it off to the north and then northeast. If Nicole's moving a bit faster, it gets a little further west before that turn occurs. So this is the 18Z GFS ensemble. A lot of different potential tracks here. And just as a note, the 18Z GFS suite has kind of shifted a little bit west, and Nicole spends a little bit of time over the far northeastern Gulf of Mexico. Now, I don't think that's going to cause, even if it did occur, that wouldn't cause re-intensification. Water temperatures in this area are around 75, which is a little bit too cool for tropical cyclones to re-intensify. But a track a little bit further west would result in some differences in surge and where it occurs. I'll get into that in just a minute, particularly in Appalachia Bay. I'll talk about that in just a second. So timing-wise, just to show you when some of these impacts are expected, this is tomorrow afternoon, and then advancing forward with time, the 18Z Euro shows landfall right around Port St. Lucie in the wee small hours of the morning tomorrow night, crossing the central Florida peninsula, re-emerging into the far northeastern Gulf of Mexico Thursday afternoon, and then moving through the eastern portions of the Panhandle Thursday night and early Friday morning. By the time we get up on Friday morning, a few showers clearing, and then Friday should be a pretty nice day after Nicole clears the area. So I want to talk about impacts, and we're going to start with surge first, because that is going to be the most widespread and the most, I think, damaging of Nicole's impacts here. National Hurricane Center peak storm surge forecasts all the way from coastal Georgia all the way south to Palm Beach County. It's calling for 3 to 5 feet of storm surge above high tide levels. So that's a pretty significant amount of surge over a wide area. There's also 2 to 4 feet of surge even further north into the Carolinas, and lower surge across kind of urban southeast Florida, maybe a couple feet. Now here on the west coast, so this is all quite high confidence. This is going to happen. This surge forecast of 2 to 4 feet in eastern Appalachia Bay, south to kind of the northern Tampa Bay metro area, along the Nature Coast and eastern Appalachia Bay. That certainly could happen. NHC is calling for a possibility of 2 to 4 foot surge, but again, that is more dependent on the exact track of Nicole on Thursday, in which way the winds are blowing, whether it's onshore or offshore. So why are we confident in those East Coast surge values of 3 to 5 feet? Well, this is where Nicole is right now, and this is its wind field. There's a broad area of high pressure to the north here, and this tight pressure gradient between the Nicole's low pressure and this high pressure over the eastern U.S. is resulting in a very tight packing of pressure gradient, and this long fetch of wind out of the northeast pointed right at the east Florida coast. So that's going to both push the water on shore. It's also causing seas of up to 20 feet by the time Nicole will be coming ashore off the east Florida coastline, which is going to further cause issues with coastal flooding, of course. So this long surge, this is very much baked in. It's out there now, and it'll continue to intensify as Nicole moves closer to the shore. Wind direction will change around kind of the east here, but you'll still have onshore flow through early Thursday across the Florida East Coast. Now we know that. So this is where the GFS has Nicole coming in here in western Appalachia Bay. This would be Thursday evening. Now this is a track, NHC forecast track is kind of like this, scrapes along the Nature Coast but stays mostly inland. A track a little bit further west, like the one suggested by the GFS here, that would result in onshore winds blowing out of the south or the southeast coming onshore the Nature Coast and Appalachia Bay, and that's how you would get those 2 to 4 foot surge values. Now if Nicole tracks over here and you have winds primarily offshore or alongshore, then you would not see that surge, or you'd see much lower surge in the Nature Coast and Appalachia Bay. So that's something we don't know yet. We don't know what the exact track is going to be as Nicole is kind of crossing north central Florida or the eastern panhandle, and it does make a difference for impacts, surge impacts across the panhandle. So that's something to keep an eye on. I'll be watching that carefully, and I'll be doing another video update tomorrow where hopefully I'll have an answer to that. So anyway, just to summarize that, 3 to 5 foot surge. It's going to be a high impact broad event over the East Coast. And there's also the possibility of some impactful surge along the Florida Gulf Coast to keep an eye on. One thing, I'm not going to dig too deep into this, but I just wanted to point out, if you're watching this video tonight and you're in the St. Johns River Basin, or you're along the Nature Coast, or you're along the Florida East Coast, and you're wondering, am I susceptible to surge or coastal flooding from Nicole? The NHC puts out a very nice storm surge flooding map that's actually zoomable. You can get right down kind of to your street level. You can see where the flooding is expected. And that, just to point out, I'm up to around Jacksonville here, you can see there's widespread river flooding and coastal flooding in the Jacksonville area, as well as further south, closer to where Nicole's center may make landfall. So if you're interested in looking at this map and seeing where your position shakes out relative to the NHC forecasts, go to www.nhc.noaa.gov, scroll down to Nicole, and click on the map that says storm surge inundation, and it'll take you to that model. So moving ahead to the wind threat, I think the wind threat here is secondary to the surge threat, and most of Florida saw higher gusts in Ian than you're going to see in Nicole. Just want to make that very clear. This is not an Ian level wind event. This is also not an event we're going to wake up tomorrow morning and this is a Category 3. I very much think that Category 1 hurricane intensity is the realistic ceiling here at landfall. But nevertheless, this is a broad storm. It's developing that more convective core. So a track that comes in like this You could certainly have an embedded pocket of hurricane force winds that moves onshore right in this area between Volusia, Brevard, Indian River, Martin, and St. Lucie counties. Those are the areas that are most at risk, this area in red, of seeing hurricane force wind gusts along the immediate coast and just inland. This broader area in orange, those are areas where have the potential to see wind gusts of anywhere from upper 50s into the 60s peak gusts for miles an hour, and that's over a very broad area of the coastline. So that's going to be all along the east coast from Jacksonville south all the way down into Palm Beach County. And there also is potential for inland wind gusts of potentially 40, 50 miles an hour or greater as Nicole moves inland across east central and west central Florida. Again, you probably saw higher in Ian for most of these areas, but the wind gusts into tropical storm force range are likely overnight Wednesday into the day Thursday for a lot of these areas. We'll have to see how the wind threat shakes out further north, but again, the eastern panhandle does have this potential of seeing anywhere from could be 35 or 45 mile an hour wind gusts up to potentially 55 or 60 mile an hour wind gusts depending on the exact track. So we have already actually seen tropical storm force wind gusts pretty much all along the Florida East Coast today. Wind gusts peaking out between 35 and 45 miles an hour today. These are observations. These are what we've already seen. Those winds will pick up over the course of the day tomorrow. Here's the European model from 18Z. This is what we're looking at around now, and then each of these steps forward is 1 hour at a time. By tomorrow afternoon, these oranges and these darker oranges that are heading towards shore, these are wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour. And then as Nicole nears shore and starts to come ashore late tomorrow evening into early Thursday, those reds coming ashore, potentially from St. Lucie or Martin or Brevard, even north of Volusia County, those are the areas that are going to see the 55 plus mile an hour wind gusts, potential hurricane force wind gusts, low end hurricane force wind gusts along the coast. And then as Nicole moves inland during the day on Thursday, we'll see a broad area of those tropical storm force wind gusts moving across east central Florida. Early in the day Thursday, west central Florida gets in on that, and so does the eastern panhandle by Thursday afternoon. And then over the storm's likely to weaken somewhat into the night hours on Thursday night, pull north and away on Friday morning. So one more serious threat to discuss is the flooding rain threat. These areas in orange are areas at risk of moderate risk of flooding rainfall. Areas in yellow are at potential for localized flooding, both urban and flash flooding. This is the rain expectation from the National Weather Service over the next 5 days or so. Most of the eastern peninsula is going to probably see between 3 and 6 inches of rainfall, maybe some locally higher totals. Western portions of the peninsula, probably 2 to 4 inches. We have seen an increase in expected rainfall totals here kind of in the eastern panhandle as the track has nudged a little bit further west and with that faster motion. Now looking for potentially anywhere from 1 to 3 inches across the eastern panhandle and kind of lower totals as you go further west with a sharp cutoff, maybe somewhere in the Panama City area as far as some of the heavier rain gets here. So, and that will add up to, of course, some potential flooding. Some of these areas, just to point out here, along the St. Johns River basin, we're still in minor to moderate flood stage from all that 20 inches of rainfall that fell in late September. In Ian, it's still very slowly draining up the St. Johns basin. So we're seeing near flood stage and flood stage readings there, and 3 to 6 inches of rainfall. It's not what you saw in Ian, but it certainly will have exacerbate those ongoing river flooding impacts across east central and north central Florida. On the flip side of the coin, see all these brown markers here. These are all river gauges across North Florida that are actually below the low water threshold for these river gauges. There's been very little rainfall here for the last 45 days, less than a quarter of norms, and the Panhandle could really use the rain. So 1 to 2 inches is not going to break the drought, but it will help a little bit here. So that's just some kind of bright side to find here for North Florida. And finally, very quickly, this area highlighted in yellow, it's an area where we could see a few tornadic cells coming in with bands, primarily late Wednesday or early Thursday across the eastern portion of the Florida Peninsula. Not looking for a widespread tornado outbreak, but it is something to keep an eye on and to have a way of getting tornado warnings if you are in this area. So I will wrap it up there. Oh, good point. The 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. It is 10 o'clock, and that is when the advisory comes out from the Hurricane Center. Let's see if that's crossed the wire yet. Does not look like it has, Jake, but thank you for asking. That should be up in just the next couple minutes with an updated track and intensity from the National Hurricane Center. So, all right. Well, thank you for watching. I am Dr. Ryan Truchelut of WeatherTiger. I will be back with more coverage of Nicole tomorrow, and I'll have more forecast videos through the life of the storm, so through Wednesday and Thursday, and hopefully wrapping up by Thursday night. So with that, I'll say good night and keep watching the skies.